Let's see. Here we go. All right, everyone, welcome to Foresight's Molecular Machines group. I'm really happy today to have two Foresight fellows presenting. Very quickly, just to remind many of you in this group, I think a few of you are already attending Vision Weekend. We have our annual member gathering coming up on December 4 and 5 in San Francisco and December 11 and 12 at a castle in France. We have lots of folks that are already in the room joining. We have the best of our biotech groups will be assembled there, fellows, mentors, keynotes, similar for our molecular machines group, fellows, mentors, keynotes, and you'll see a few familiar today presenting faces there. And we have Feynman Prize winners and so forth all assembled there. We have our computer science track and we'll have our neurotechnology, energy and space track to just try to see whether on the long run we can make a little bit more collaboration happen across disciplines. We'll be at the Internet Archive, a rocket company in a ship in San Francisco and a beautiful mansion. And then in France, for those of you who are in Europe, we'll be at a beautiful castle. I'll share more info on that in the chat. There are application-based tickets, so you can apply. Everyone in this group is very much eligible for one of the application-based tickets. So please consider applying for those tickets if you're interested in joining and meeting everyone in person before we disperse again into the virtual layer. I'll share more info on that in the chat, but for now, I just want to welcome you all and to today's presentation. I couldn't be happier to have the pleasure to introduce two Foresight fellows even for today's talk. And so we have Yunyan from the Northwestern University and especially and Liang Feng as well, same university, and they'll be both presenting on artificial molecular pumps from solution to surfaces. Really exciting presentation. I just had a peek on it, so we are off to a really exciting start. And without further ado, I'm so happy to have you both here. Thank you so much for joining. I'll share more info on both of your bios in the chat. And after Yunyan presents, Liang will present, and then we have a Q&A. So thanks everyone for joining, and I'll be in the chat for more questions.
All right, so I should share my screen then. Everybody seeing is okay?
Looks good to me.
All right, fantastic. So yeah, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. And my name is Yunyan, and today I'm really glad and honored to give a presentation, a seminar talk here at Foresight Institute for the Molecular Machines Interest Group. And I would like to really thank the Foresight Institute for the whole year for their support as a Foresight fellow to my career. And today I will briefly talk about my research efforts here at Northwestern University, working with Fraser, and largely focusing on the topic of exploring control and precision in polymer synthesis and in materials science and using artificial molecular machines. So here at the top, we can see that the nicely crafted movies are showing the operation of artificial molecular pumps that can be used to produce enthalpically and entropically demanding toxins and polyurethanes, and with exquisite control that mimicking nature and precision, and which will be my central topic in my first part from using the title with artificial molecular pumps from solution to services. So my talk will be focusing on the solution part. And then later on, I will let my colleague Liang share his exciting story of using artificial molecular pumps on surfaces. So next. Well, as a polymer chemist by training, actually, the year 2020, we know that has marked the 100 years of anniversary of when Professor Staudinger first coined the term of polymerizations and the concept of polymers as high molecular weight molecules. And since then, we know that commodity polymers has basically widely used in our everyday life and basically revolutionized the modern society. And during the last 30 years, that we have witnessed significant progress, right, in controlling the architecture of precision polymers, such as chain length and the shape and the composition topology, and thanks to the development of controlled chain growth polymerization techniques. But on the other hand, we know polymer chemists have actually long been fascinated and inspired by nature's ability to control precisely the location of monomers in polymer chain, which they describe it as a holy grail of polymer synthesis. So therefore, in recent decades, the development of sequence-controlled polymers has been a very hot area in polymer chemistry and material science overall. So my research here at Northwestern, reflecting the last part of this slide, is about answering the question that how we can mimic nature and build artificial molecular machines to produce synthetic polymers with precision. Comparing with this, commonly used polymerization techniques that typically involving transition metals, we have to look at how nature uses biomolecular machines to build materials of life. For example, we all know that nature uses helices or DNA polymerases to precisely produce or replicate double-strand DNAs, or ribosomes use amino acids to build different type of life-sustaining peptide or proteins. So one thing we have to point out is the functional biopolymers that produced by nature often possessing great control in terms of sequences, but I think it's very limited in terms of structural diversity, which is actually in contrast to what we have achieved in the variety of synthetic polymers that can sustain harsh environment or conditions. So overall, by looking back these biomolecular machines, our question is, can we learn some of nature's design principles, and maybe someday we can outcompete nature's ability to produce micromolecules with sophistication and precision? So actually, by looking back the 2016 Nobel Prize in Chemistry, we all know for the design and synthesis of molecular machines, that we have already had some of the answers to this question of whether we can rival nature's ability to make polymers. And I'm actually lucky enough to join the Fraser's group here at Northwestern after he got the award. So previously, researchers that in this field has made a large progress, great progress in making nanocars or molecular-sized synthetic robot. But after I joined Fraser's group, that as a beginner actually in this field, but a polymer chemist by training, I constantly ask myself that what is the next goal that we can achieve by the rise and the promise of artificial molecular machines, and how to design artificial molecular machines that are capable of building synthetic polymers with exquisite control. So first, let us look at how the differences in controlling motions at different length scales, right? We all know that in a microscopic world, motions are conducted at very high Reynolds numbers, such as, in these movies, this wind-powered sculptures are able to move unidirectionally with force from the wind, or pretty much we all know that motions are controlled by, such motion are controlled by inertia, momentum, friction, and gravity in general, and will become static in the absence of a force. But on the other hand, when we shrink objects into microscopic or even nanoscopic levels, such as kinesins shown in this picture below, that the motion are conducted at very low Reynolds number, and therefore they will be experience a great thermal fluctuations, and therefore the viscous force from the surroundings are constantly dampen their movement. So I really like the quote from a biophysicist, Dean Ostumin, maybe he's also in the audience, that used to refer the motions as a swim in molasses and walk in a hurricane. And in order to push a molecular size particle unidirectionally uphill along an energy landscape, so you cannot simply just borrow the concept from a mechanical approach from the big machines that we found in our everyday, like your cars, your pumps, water pumps, whatever. And instead, nature used a ratcheting mechanism by controlling the free energy states of collection of molecules, be it an enzyme or transmembrane proteins. So similarly, chemists has start to think about building a wholly synthetic artificial molecular machines in a bottom-up approach, right? By designing molecules that are able to move under ratcheting approaches. So in order to mimic the nature's directional motion by constructing artificial molecular machines, as a synthetic chemist, we have to design molecules that are able to move relatively to each other. Therefore, this molecule has to be connected in this very unusual way by introducing this new concept of a chemical bond called a mechanical bond. So this type of bond can be found in mechanically interlocked molecules, such as rotexane showing here, or the catenins, where in the rotexane case, you have a ring mechanically interlocked with a thread, and they put two big stopper at both ends, the ring will never leave this thread. And while cations, you have two rings mechanically interlocked with each other. So the thesis of these mechanically interlocked mechanically interlocked molecules are heavily relying on non-covalent bonding interactions. So the movie showing here is construction of these type of molecules, but using the donor-acceptor interactions where the blue molecules moiety indicate electron deficient parts and the red indicating an electron-rich part of the molecule. So our group actually in 2010 have serendipitously stumbled upon this very unique type of non-covalent bonding interactions called the radical pairing interactions. So basically using our famous blue box, and you injecting two electrons into the blue box, you form this dicationic, diradical dicationic species. And then you inject one electron to the Viologen unit, you form a monoradical monocationic species. The combination of these two radical species led to this very strong tris radical complexes based on radical pairing interactions. Of course, the nature of this type of interaction is based on SOMO orbital overlapping. So, but the very unique feature of this interaction is that upon reducing, these two molecules can become very attractive with each other and form very strong complexes. However, upon oxidation, they become very repulsive and tend to separate from each other as far as possible. And there are some key design factors in designing this non-equilibrium systems, where in our system, you have this very attractive radical pairing interactions when both the two compounds are reduced. Well, after they are oxidized, they actually form very strong destabilizing Coulombic repulsions. They want to separate as far as possible. So by playing with the reduction and oxidation, we're able to control these non-equilibrium systems that you can able to control the kinetics of association and dissociation. And that's how you design a non-equilibrium systems. So based on this very unique radical pairing interactions, at first pioneered by one of the genius Ph.D. student Chu Yang, that we are able to design this Mark I artificial molecular pump, where you have your Coulombic barrier at the very front. So and plus this Coulombic potential radical recognition site, but when it's oxidized, you have 3 charges, and this ring has also 4 charges. It's not going to thread into the collecting chain, right? Because of very strong Coulombic repulsions, where you have also a steric barrier to start to manipulate the kinetics of this pumping process. And then later on, you have this collecting chain to able to accommodate the ring once the ring is recruited. And of course, you have a very big stopper at the very end to prevent the ring from dethreading once the ring is mechanically interlocked with the dumbbell. So the detailed structures showing here. And it's actually a trial and error. It takes a lot of time to design such pump, and it's very delicate. And here it shows the operation of this artificial molecular pump, the Mark I, where you see 2 movies. In details, right? When you have the ring at the outside, when it's oxidized, nothing will happen. When you reduce the system, the ring will be recruited to the recognition site, which is this Viologen unit. And then upon oxidation, the ring will be pushed over this IPP steric barrier unidirectionally into the collecting chain upon a little bit of thermal activation. And you can repeat this process again by reducing this whole system, and with the second ring will be recruited. Thus, you are actually doing work. These artificial molecular pumps are performing work repetitively and progressively, and making anthropically and entropically demanding molecular entities. So this whole process actually can be closely monitored by NMR analysis. And we see that upon oxidations, you see actually this meta-stable state where the ring is around the IPP steric barriers. And upon a little bit wait for a few hours or heat the system up a little bit, you see that it slowly relaxed and collected onto the collecting chain. And this process can actually be monitored again when the second ring joins the first ring on the collecting chain. So later on in 2017, another postdoc that Christian Pozzetto, maybe also in the list or in the audience, that actually did this genius kind of moderations of our Mark I generation artificial molecular pumps by flipping the methyl group from pointing outside and now they're pointing sort of inward, and also reducing the carbon atoms from 2 here, the linker, to 1, and actually really improve the efficiency of operating this pump. Now it can be completed in only 1 hour at room temperature and within minutes actually at 42 degrees. And the small molecule collecting chains, right? Then we know that previous work, using small molecule collecting chains are only able to sort of accommodate 1 or 2 rings at a time. So we want to further push the boundary that design a system that can recruit as many rings as possible. So in this case, we're turning this artificial molecular pumps to a precise polyurethane synthesizer where you can control the exact number of rings. So why we're interested in making polyurethanes in the first place, that is because that polyurethanes are very important precursors for sliding ring materials by cross-linking these free moving rings with each other. So these materials actually has attracted a lot of attention in recent years as they exhibit very unique mechanical properties. So in these materials, these movable crosslinks that can evenly distribute applied tension by this so-called Pulley effect, making them tough and highly stretchable. So as a result, they can be stretch resistance or even self-heatable. And Professor Ito in Japan is actually the pioneers in this field. And by combining with other reversible chemical reactions, these slider ring structures that can be used in self-healing hydrogels, or researchers have also tried to use slide rings inside the silicon battery electrodes to accommodate the large volume change during the charge and discharge of the battery. And apparently that in all these cases, you can see that the density or the number of threaded rings plays a very important role in determining the mechanical properties of these sliding ring materials, as they determine the overall degree of motion of the crosslinks in these materials. So the traditional thesis of polyurethanes relies heavily on non-covalent bonding interactions, right? In practice, we know by just mixing the rings and the polymer dumbbell together, right? Based on some non-covalent bonding interactions, will form the pseudo-retaxanes or inclusion complex, and then just uncap both ends of the polymer with the bigger stoppers, then you form polyurethanes. And apparently, this method has limited control over the density of threaded microcycles. And the transition metal catalyzed sort of modern polymerization techniques has also been applied in either element polymerizations that we can sort of control the number of or the density of the rings to some extent by ring opening polymerization of cation-based monomers. But the fundamental question is how we can achieve a complete control over the density of threaded microcycles. So this question led to our pioneer work by using artificial molecular pumps as a precise polyurethane synthesizer. Here we choose a simple PEG polymer with a molecular weight 2000 as a simple polymer example, and as a polymer collecting chain, and attach 2 molecular pumps at both ends of the polymer. And this polymer-based dumbbell can be synthesized through click chemistry and isolated using reverse phase chromatography and with very high yield. And with this polymer dumbbell in hand, we start to explore the possibility of one-pot chemical synthesis of polyurethanes with a defined number of threaded rings, right? The precision polymer synthesis of polyurethane with the precise number of threaded rings onto this polymer chain just has never been realized before. So by attaching artificial molecular pumps at both ends of the polymer, so we are able to recruit 2 rings at a time, right, onto this collecting chain using redox chemistry, right? We basically use a cobalamin as a strong reductant and NOPF6 as a strong oxidant. But well, we can definitely achieve this type of synthesis with different synthesis of polyurethanes with different number, a precisely defined number of rings. But the biggest challenge of this project is to how we can convince the readers or the viewers that the exact number of threaded rings, right, on the collecting chain. And the number of the rings actually can be roughly estimated, right, by quantitative NMR analysis. And here we use a very rigorously designed quantitative NMR analysis and the synthesis of the 3 toxins where 2 rings are collected onto the polymer chain by 1 redox cycle using cobalamin and NOPF6. And this redoxin can be just generated in a few hours, adopting 1 redox cycle. And this time, right, the total time of generating this polyurethane, including the time of both the synthesis in the glove box and purification, use reverse phase chromatography. So it's very efficient. And from this proton NMR spectra in this slide, that we can determine how many rings that are actually recruited onto the polymer dumbbell by the bulk integration of blue box peaks. Above each peak, right, the number of corresponding is corresponding to the theoretical integration value, and the comparison, right, between the 2 values that can confirm how many rings are actually onto the polymer dumbbells. Similarly, we have also estimated the number of rings by using quantitative NMR regarding polyurethanes, either with 4 rings or 6 rings, 8 rings, and up to 10 rings. Well, of course, the ultimate confirmation is regarding the number of threaded rings come from a very high resolution mass spectrometry and with another sort of expert group at that time down to South Florida. We are able to collaborate with them and confirm the exact nature of these polyurethanes in terms of the number of threaded rings. But of course, this is not a trivial task, right? Because bear in mind that we're using a polydispersed, not a discrete molecule. That is why you see a distribution of peaks in all of the spectra. So similarly, with a lot of effort made by my collaborators, we have also confirmed the exact numbers of threaded rings in terms of, 5-retoxin, 7-retoxin, and 9-retoxin, and up to 11-retoxin. So we have also probed the size differences across all the polyurethane samples. You can see that in ICEC analysis, you have when you have more and more rings, you have a decreasing decreasing elution time. Similarly, in dynamic light scattering measurement, you see increasing hydrodynamic diameters when you have more and more rings onto the same polymer chain. And now we have established this highly efficient pumping system for the control synthesis polyurethanes with a defined number of microcycles. We can basically making all this highly charged away from equilibrium polyelectrolytes and the overall operations, right? Applying this precise polyurethane synthesizer to produce polyurethanes with many, many charges, right, represent a highly energetic away from equilibrium process, which has many maybe imminent like implications. And one of them being able to mount many, many charges into polymers, such as in this case, you have 10 rings, and that means you have 40 movable charges on a single polymer chain. So plus the charges on the polymer dumbbell itself, there's overall 46 overall charges. So maybe this is a new way to make highly energetic materials. And here is this movie showing the whole precise production of polyurethanes through consecutive redox cycles, right? A few things to point out is all these symbols are representing either heating or negative potential means a reduction state, and positive potential means a oxidation state and a little bit heat. And then you start to build this whole polyurethanes to recruit rings two at once, and the system getting more and more complicated. So maybe I will actually speed up this a little bit. And since I'm running out of time I'll just give the floor to Liang, I think. So eventually we're able to recruit 10 rings at right now. So in summary, I think I don't need to talk too much about, we are able to make polyurethanes, right, using consecutive redox cycle in one pot, harnessing artificial molecular pumps. And this is the most precise method, right, for the control synthesis of, control things away from equilibrium entropic demanding polyurethanes. And we're lucky that this fleet of polyurethanes has been chosen as one of the C&E molecules of the year 2020. So, and I also want to just spend a little bit more time briefly talking about my recent ongoing projects, some preliminary data about how we want to proceed of using artificial molecular pumps, right, in solutions. And all this definitely proves that only our research is a tip of the iceberg, that we have a lot of more things to do. So one particular problem with our previously operation is accumulation of chemical waste, right, during the redox cycle. So the ease of operation of nature of redox reactions are being basically involving injecting and withdrawing electrons. So let us think the use of electricity as a sole power source to operate the polyurethane synthesizer. So here we want to adopt the design commonly used in redox flow batteries, that we are able to just use H cell, where in one of the chambers you put all your molecules, your dumbbell, your blue boxes, and another chamber just add this sort of ammonium sort of modified ferrocene compound just to balance the current. And in the middle, you can put an ionic exchange membrane to separate the two electrode chamber. And in this case, we're able to just apply a negative charge for the reduction and a positive potential for the oxidation, and able to basically monitor the whole redox process using potential stat, and also to power our polyurethane synthesizer. So here is a picture that's showing how we're actually setting everything up. So it's a bulk electrolysis setup, and the conditions is just fairly simple. And using this setup, right, using the built-in program called repeating controlled potential colorimetry in our potential stat, that we're able to operate the artificial molecular pumps, right, continuously without any human intervention for here in this case 4 redox cycles. You can actually monitor the whole process where you have charges injecting, withdrawing, injecting, withdrawing. So the total operation time for 4 cycles are just 8 hours, right? Basically set up everything and let it run automated. And after 8 hours, you are able to produce polyurethanes with 8 rings on it, right? So it's quite simple. And we are able also to push the envelope by using a large PEG polymer, in this case, an 8-arm star polymer with a molecular weight 20,000. And we just simply apply 6 redox cycles. That's just half day in total without any human interventions. We're able to make a 49 retaxins. That means we have put 48 rings onto this star polymer, where you can see that in the integration part, it matches pretty well with the theoretical integration. But that being said, we're now actually having the problem of using mass spec to further confirm the nature, the number of threaded rings, because now the polymer are so large and the molecular weight is so big. So it's really hard to analyze these systems and using mass spec anymore. So we can only rely on the quantitative NMR analysis in this case. But if you put 48 rings onto the onto the polymers, that equals to 216 overall charges that we can put. And also the next step we want to work on is actually the sequence controlled polyurethane synthesizers, where you have different type of modified blue boxes, where you have different chemical nature, that we probably able to just pump them into a specific sequences that you can actually control to produce polyurethanes with this palindromic arrays of constitutional heterotopic rings, with our position in this constitutionally symmetric dumbbells, and even store information, right, using these unnatural synthetic polymers. So in this case, we probably can realize this, what we call a mechanical bonding induced site selective functionalizations, and we envision this to be a potential way that can make a sequence controlled polymers. And I think this is the last slide of my talk, and I will actually hand the floor to my colleague Liang, then he will share some more exciting recent progress regarding mechanical sorption. All right, Liang, floor is yours.
Okay, so thank you very much for your wonderful talk about this molecular pump. Hello, everyone. I will talk about some updates in our recent discovery on mechanical sorption, which is in collaboration with Yunyan. And so today we'll talk about this mechanical sorption, which we have discovered recently, a fundamentally new sorption mode, in addition to the physics sorption and the chemical sorption. So speaking of dynamic molecules, we have a large number of dynamic molecules, including the shuttles, molecular switches, molecular motors, pumps. They usually show very limited organization or amplification in bulk solution. They are widely studied in the bulk solution. However, the problem or the challenge in the bulk solution is that they show they show very limited collaborativity due to their random orientation. So my task, my background is working on the solid material. So my goal is to immobilize and organize those molecular machines on the surfaces of solid materials or inside the pores of the solid of the porous materials to amplify their output. There are many previous work related to organizing the dynamic of molecular machines on the pores of the mental organic frameworks. For example, here we have the purple bar is the mental clusters, and the green bar is the organic linker. So we can construct porous materials with very large pores, and then put the molecular machines inside those pores so that they can operate independently. There are many types of dynamics. For example, the random linear motions or rotational motions, like the rotor, the catalysis, the rotation, they have been incorporated in the porous materials. And another type of dynamic behavior is the switching behavior. For example, we have a molecular switch that can change from state 1 to state 0 and back and forth. And those can also be integrated in the porous material. And recently, Fringer and Kowalker also reported a machine type of behavior, the unidirectional behavior in the framework. That's the installation of the molecular motor in those MOFs. And our group is working on molecular pumps. This pump behavior has already seen in the biological world. I think Yunyan has talked about a lot on this away from equilibrium transportation. For example, in this enzyme, it can transport the proton actively from the outside the cell to the inside of the cell. And many colleagues in our group have designed these artificial molecular pumps that can recruit the rings from the bulk solution to the connect chain. And Yunyan just talk about this precise synthesis of polyurethanes precise member of the rings. However, all those synthetic systems, they all exist in the solution phase and show very limited organization. So my task is to synthesize, to construct the surfaces to immobilize those dynamic behaviors. However, currently there is no solid that show the behavior that can actively transfer the molecules or the cargo from the solution phase to the box surface, to the surfaces of the solid. And when we look into the absorbent material, they can only do passive absorption. So passive absorption that would only involve the transportation of the absorbent from the solution phase from a very high concentration solution region to the surfaces with a very low concentration. It can only be achieved from high concentration to the low concentration. Well, if we can construct a solid material that transfer the cargo from a low concentration to a high concentration, that has not been achieved in so far. So my research focuses on using MOFs as a platform to organize those artificial molecular machines, especially this molecular pumps, so that we can recruit the rings, recruit the molecules from the box solution to the surfaces away from equilibrium. So there are many reasons that we choose MOFs as the initial example to study this mechanics of your phenomena, because MOFs, they are well-defined solid material. They have mental clusters and they have organic linkers. So they have well-defined compositions. And during the analysis, we can use the organic linkers as an internal standard, so we can analyze the ratio, the composition of the whole material. And also MOFs have also very high stability. They can be stable after the redox treatment and also the acid-based treatment. They are very stable materials, and they also have the mental clusters that can be utilized to hold those molecular pumps. So that's the main reason we choose MOFs as the platform to immobilize those artificial molecular pumps. And the design of this molecular pump includes 3 parts. First is the pumping cassette. As Yunyan have talked about this part in detail, the mechanism of the pumping cassette, including 2 steps. The first step is to utilize this redox condition to attract the rings from the solution phase to the pumping cassette. And the second step involves the oxidation process that can report the ring from the pumping cassette to the connect chain. So through this redox control process, we can recruit the rings from the solution phase to the pumping cassette, and then for the rings to sit on the connect chain after the oxidation process. And then we have the connect chain here, which is a polymer, PEG polymer, that is very long, so we can recruit a very high number of rings sitting on this connect chain. So the last part of this pumping molecule is a gate, the carboxyl gate here. That's the main interaction we can use to immobilize those pumping molecules on the surfaces of the MOF materials. So on the MOF materials, we utilize this zirconium-based MOF. It has a lot of basic site, so we can utilize this acid-based reaction to immobilize those pump molecules on the surfaces of MOFs, and then use the redox reactions to recruit the rings from the solution phase to the surfaces of the MOF materials. For example, here I show the 5th cycle, right? After the redox reaction, we can recruit the rings from the solution on the pumping cassette by generating this radical complex. And after the oxidation process, the rings will be reported onto the connect chain to generate a very high energy state on the surfaces. And this is quite different from the traditional chemical absorption and the physical absorption. This is away from equilibrium transportation. We can attract the rings from a very low concentration solution to a region with very high concentration of, on the surfaces. And we can also use acid to break the coordination bond between the pump molecules and the surfaces, so we can release the rings spontaneously. All those processes, the redox reaction, the acid-base reaction, do not hurt any part of the molecule involved in the system. So we can recycle every component, like the surfaces, pump, and the rings. So the whole process is also recyclable. This is another illustration about how this process happens on the surfaces of MOFs. For example, we have a zirconium MOF. You can see the blue ball here is the zirconium cluster. That's the place we can load the carboxylate group. And through the grafting, we can load the azide group on the surfaces of the MOF, and then use click reaction to click the pump molecules on the surfaces of the MOF materials. And then we use the redox reaction to recruit the rings from the solution onto the surfaces. And we can do as many as we can do a lot of cycles. Here we do 5 cycles. We can definitely increase the cycles to recruit more rings on the surfaces and store them in a high energy state. And those rings can also be released after the acid trigger. So we can release the energy we stored it on the surfaces. This is another presentation that shows the whole process. For example, we synthesize the MOF nanosheet and then use the acid reaction to load to graft the pump molecules on the surfaces of this MOF nanosheet. And after the redox reaction, we can recruit the rings from the solution to the surfaces of these nanomaterials. We can do like one cycle, 2 cycle, and up to 5 cycle. We can continue to do that to recruit a lot of rings from the solution to the surfaces. And the one amazing thing here is that no matter how dilute the rings is in the solution, we can still attract the rings or recruit the rings to the surfaces away from equilibrium. And those rings can be released after the acid treatment. So when we compare this process with the biological system, the active transport is quite similar transportation process between 2 compartments. For example, this protein can transport the protons from an apartment to the internal apartment in the cells with a very high concentration of the proton. And what we can do here using the surfaces, use the mechanized surfaces, can do a similar thing, transfer the rings from a box solution to the interface of on the surfaces. And this can also achieve transportation from a low concentration range to a high concentration range. And due to we can also calculate the concentration of the rings on the surfaces actually. For example, let's look at the second cycle of the redox reaction. Before the second cycle, in the solution phase, we have 7.67 millimole per liter. And on the surfaces, we already have 1 set of rings that make the concentration is 55.4 millimole per liter. But after the second redox reaction, we recruit the second set of rings on the surfaces, increasing the concentration of rings on the surfaces from 55.4 to 111 millimole per liter, and the concentration of the rings in the solution part decreased a little bit. So you can see that from the concentration members, we also can achieve this transportation process from low concentration to a high concentration. This has never been achieved in the solid material, and it's actually the first example that can show an active absorption is possible. Yeah. And basically we can recruit the rings no matter the concentration, no matter its concentration in the solution phase, we can recruit it on the connection on the surfaces very actively. Yeah. So if we compare this new phenomenon with the traditional physics option and the chemistry option, we notice that the physics option and the chemistry option, they are both equilibrium-based absorption, and during the absorption process, they are spontaneous. And during the desorption process, they typically require energy for the desorption. And the only difference is that the physical absorption needs very little energy for the desorption, and the chemical absorption require a lot of energy to achieve this desorption. And speaking of the interaction between the surfaces and the absorbents, they form van der Waals interaction or electronic interactions, or form monolayer and the multi-layers on the surfaces. However, in our mechanical solution, we are actually studying investigating a non-equilibrium system, where the absorption they require energy to transfer the cargoes, to transfer the molecules from a very low concentration to a very high concentration. And then, if we want to dissolve it, the dissolution process is actually spontaneous. It's quite different from the traditional physical absorption and the chemical absorption. And speaking of the surface force between the absorbers and the absorbents, it's actually mechanical bonds, a new type of bond formed between on the surfaces, and they form stack model instead of the traditional modular or multi-layer model. So for example, here I show a typical case of chemical absorption. So chemical absorption, usually we have a bonding site, and then we put one rings on this bonding site and form a monolayer absorption type on the surfaces. And it can transfer cargoes from a high concentration to a low concentration. That's a typical chemical absorption. But in here, we can tune the energy state of the molecule on the surfaces, and then recruit the molecules from the low concentration, low energy state to a high energy state. I think that's the key difference between our mechanical solution and also the chemical solution process. So in the future, so in this study, we only focus on the blue box, the blue ring here. We envision that in the future we can put the cargoes on these blue rings, so we can extend the scope of mechanical solution to a wide range of molecules. For example, we can put the azide group on the blue ring, and then to use some click reaction or other type of reaction to modify the carriers with cargoes. And these cargoes could be anything, right? Like the small molecules, like the macromolecules, the polymers, or even enzyme or nanoparticles. We can put those almost anything on the blue box for the pumping process, and then storage all those materials on the surfaces of a solid in a non-equilibrium state. I think this is a very opens a lot of opportunities and a transformative way to control chemistry at the surfaces and also the interface. For example, this example, Yunyan has already mentioned this sequence control monomer synthesis. Right on the surfaces, we have a polymer and then have a pumping cassette, so we can pump the rings sequentially and then link them together to generate this sequential sequence control polymer synthesis. And since we are also developing a new type of active solution that can maintain a very high energy state at the surfaces. This is quite different from the traditional equilibrium-based system. And I think it's just at the beginning. In the future, we will do more to explore the application or also the utility of this new phenomenon in many fields. I think currently we are envisioning that it would be very useful in the field like gas supervision and other storage, and especially the catalysis that are the main field that it may bring a lot of attention to the chemists and the material scientists. Finally, I want to thank the Fraser group and the Yunyan for the collaboration, and also Dean and Omar Faha and many other co-workers on this works. I want to thank the Foresight and Northwestern University for the help and support through this project. Thank you. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so, so much. If you don't mind, I'm going to stop. Oh, you already stopped sharing the screen. Fantastic. Well, I have a few questions that are more general, but we already have a few here in the chat. So perhaps, Stefan, would you like to go first?
Oh, yeah, I can do. Yeah, hi, thanks for the talks. Yeah, I was just wondering what sort of yields you get on these sort of single pumping cycles. Because obviously, you're talking about these ideas of defining sequences where you'd need them to be pretty much quantitative, wouldn't you, I think, in order to actually get good fidelity for those sequences. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, absolutely. And when we do the pumping cycle, we actually use a large excess of blue boxes just to force that every ring that, well, every pump actually can recruit a ring, in every cycle. So in that case, that we're basically have almost near quantity 100% yield. Theoretically, right? But not the isolated yield, but in terms of recruiting rings, I think is almost too quantitative. So you are right? To able to for a sequence control, you have to make sure every sequence is right? Every cycle has to work 100% in efficiency. Yes, this is something we're trying to also to work on. I think right now our preliminary data shows it's no problem with all these different kinds of rings, as long as the binding constant are still large enough to sort of make sure every step is near quantitative. Yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you.
Fantastic, lovely. Next one up, we have Alex.
Hi, I really enjoyed those presentations. Liang, so I did my PhD in robust dynamics as well. I was trying to put rhotaxanes and things into MOFs. So my question is related to the concept of robust dynamics. So if you have this pumping cassette on top of a surface, are you worried that you kind of don't have robust dynamics? Won't it be more liable to be damaged or kind of taken off, or that repeating action is eventually going to degrade something?
So in my case, I didn't see that issues, because both components, they are very stable in the robust dynamic system. For example, the robust part, the MOF part, they are very stable, and the connection between the MOF and the pump, and also very stable, the zirconium oxygen bond. So we use like a zirconium oxygen bond. They are acid stable, water stable bond that can also ensure the structural integrity, and also the pump part. Yeah, I think we did see under some conditions, it may destroy the connection between the polymer and the MOF part, but under certain conditions, we can ensure the robust dynamics. That's quite important, that part, yeah, to select the right conditions to maintain the robust dynamics of the whole material. Yeah, it's not always happening. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to criticize the design in any way, shape, or form. It's just, I know I worked in robust dynamics myself, and I know how difficult it is when you take these things to the solid state and you want this repeating motion. And that's very easy to achieve in solution, but as soon as you get to solid state, you have these issues. So I do really like the design though.
Yeah, I think I want to make another comment on that. So in our system, the reason we choose nanosheet, that's the main concern of the point you just mentioned, because nanosheets, they are highly dispersible in the solution. We don't have like steric hindrance in those 2D extended 2D nanostructures, so we can ensure that most of the pumping cassette can work independently. I think that's a very important thing. And then we keep the ratio. We can control the ratio of the pump molecules on the nanosheet, so we can manipulate the distance between the machines on the surfaces, right? So we can ensure that each machine can operate very independently on the surfaces. Yeah, I think that's a very important factor we should consider during the design. And if we make the pump too crowded, or if we put the pump inside the pores. I think most robust dynamics happen inside the pores, right? That may decrease the efficiency of the machine. Yeah.
I suppose that's the best thing. So you've got your pump cassettes actually bonded to the zirconium. So that's the beauty of a MOF design, is you can change those linkers, as I'm sure you know very, very well. So if you change the distance between those metal centers, then you can absolutely change your localized concentration of those pumps. It's really nice.
Yes. That's a part we haven't done yet. We still are working on that part. Yeah, we are looking forward to the results. We will see. Yeah. Well, thank you for your suggestions. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We have one more technical question, and then I have one final question about future directories, what this group can do. But first one up, we have Thomas.
Yeah, great work, both of you. This is beautiful stuff. So I have a question that's, I guess, kind of related to the bacteriorhodopsin analogy that you drew, Liang, and that is basically that in biology, two things happen in any of these kind of energy transduction systems. First, you sort of build something, so you take energy from something like light or from something like metabolism to build up a proton gradient, right? But then biological systems use the energy stored in those proton gradients to do things like synthesize ATP or to do more complex things via sort of electrical signaling. And what I'm wondering is whether you see any pathway to sort of using in a controlled manner the energy that you're able to store by sort of creating these concentration gradients of the rings that you make.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good question about the outlook of this research. Yes, we store high energy on the surfaces, but if we use acid to trigger the cleavage of the coordination bonds, the ring will release and the energy will be released too. So we didn't harness this energy. I think that's a very big question for us too. How do we come up a way to utilize this stored energy? Yeah, we don't have a very clear answer to that, but we think that after like decades or years development, we should have a solution for that. What about the Yunyan's opinion in this direction?
Yeah, I feel the same thing. I think we talk about this throughout the whole year program, right? You especially the first couple of workshops where we sort of, and also I think Dean is very keen on this type of progress, and he's also constantly ask us, during our unlimited amount of sort of Zoom meetings, and when we collaborated with him, how we're gonna harness this stored energy to do things, right? And first thing I think the first step we want to do is to measure the amount of energy, right? We want to answer this question first, and then we start to harness, the energy in that manner. I think we're sort of also still working on how we can actually quantitatively measure the amount of energy stored on the surface, and then we can think about how we can use it. I think, yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's definitely at the very forefront of this type of research. Thank you.
Yeah. I want to add a sentence about this question. So I think the solution probably lies in the cargo part. I think when we release a ring, if we have a cargo linked on the ring, maybe we can also release the cargos, and that cargo will be utilized in some way. Yeah. I think that's the direction we are thinking about. We are trying to functionalize the ring and then connect it with other useful cargos to explore the application of this stored energy. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I spoke too soon. We have one more technical question, and then I'll do my final one. So if you want to go ahead, Stefan.
Yeah, sorry, just one more question. I mean, obviously this is really nice proof of sort of concept work, but do you foresee a way in which you could adapt this sort of technology to, instead of pumping macrocycles, pump molecules directly into the cavities of MOFs? So for example, then you could start thinking about having CO2, for example, very relevant for energy sort of environmental concerns, or glucose or something for diabetes, pumped directly into the cavities of a MOF or a cage, for example, rather than having to first attach it to a macrocycle. Do you foresee some sort of way in which this technology could be adapted for that?
I think we have discussed about this question within our subgroup. We don't think we cannot think of any other ways if we don't use the rings, the mechanical bonds. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, we cannot think of any other ways that can pump molecules instead of the mechanically instead of the formation of these mechanical bonds within the pumping cassette. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good question. We can imagine, we can keep thinking in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add just a few points. I think so far we just demonstrate this concept because our system is quite unique, and I think our system should not be the only one that can do such a thing. I think there are many other researchers out there that are working on this type of research. I think also Professor David Lee also is working closely in this type of machines that we are now not only have energy ratchet based molecular pumps, and his group developed the information ratchet based molecular pumps. I think the field is still working towards our goal of in later on maybe we can use such active absorption phenomena to absorb CO2 or glucose, or for sensing or for carbon captures. I think the outlook is definitely promising, but we still need to figure out a way to work and research beyond mechanical bond or even our current design. Yeah, thank you.
Well, my question is a pretty good. Oh wait, Alex had a follow-up question on the CO2 aspect. Alex, do you want to ask it just here, because we're since on the topic? Otherwise, I would have moved on.
Well, I wasn't going to add much. I'm just wondering how you do that. Liang is quite right. You can make a macrocycle do that because you have this dynamic way where it follows the track, if you will. It's a train that's running along the track. So with CO2, you've got something bouncing around. You have to convince it to go into the pores. So you either do that by enticing it using, I don't know, some kind of equilibrium, so it goes in, or you have to physically grab it and push it in. So I suppose you have to be careful the way that you say pump.
Yeah, we have some nodding. Okay, then I will launch into my final question, which is a little bit more, I guess, future, but also action oriented. And so, you've already started exploring a little bit about what the future possibilities of this could be. But if you really want to just, lay out a quick tour of like, where could this go in the future? And then also very practically, what could this group really do to help you move forward with the work?
Okay, I guess this is for both of us. Okay, I'll go first. I think definitely I learned a lot throughout the whole year that, definitely seeing all this exciting and cutting edge research at the forefront of these directions. And I do hope that, I think since now, this research, the mechanical absorption is sort of like collaboration with me with Liang. And I think this brings up the, I think in order to push the next goal, or even within the group or within the whole community, is about through collaborating with people, experts in different, with different expertise, either a chemist or, material scientist or engineers. I think this is how I think this is really good for this group, right? We bring people with different expertise, and eventually, and I think we can collaborate on something big and working towards a holy grail of this research area. Thank you.
Yeah. I think that's a very good point by introducing the expertise from a different area. Like Yunyan is from a polymer background, and I'm actually from a porous material background into this molecular machine community. I think definitely generate more and more exciting opportunities. And what we have done here, what we have shown here, is actually transfer the traditional phenomena at the molecular level, and then transfer it at a much higher length scale, transforming from nanoscale to the macroscopic level. I think that's a very exciting direction to go. And in the future, maybe we will try to generate some device based on the mechanical solution and really put it into the practical applications. I think that's our long-term goal in this research to really try to develop some useful application based on the unidirectional motion of molecular pumps and other machines as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, lovely. Well, I can't thank you both enough. This is really exciting work. I shared the science article here in the chat, and I hope to see both of you at Vision Week. And in fact, I can't wait to see you in person. And yeah, for all of you, we will be online. We're scheduling another very exciting off-the-record talk for the next few weeks. So that's one to look out for, and that will be off the record. So if you don't join, there will be no way to follow up on the recording. But for now, I just really, really want to thank you. You do fantastic work. Thanks for being so precise and also forward-looking. It was a real pleasure to have you. And for all of you guys, I hope to see you again in the next few weeks. Thank you so much for joining. Bye, everyone.